Hello and welcome back to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. I am your host, Eric Hurlock. It's the middle of July 2019 here in southeastern Pennsylvania. It's super duper hot out, like tons of humidity. And people around here, they say things like, is it hot enough for you? And of course, it's a rhetorical question, but yeah, the answer is always yes, it's plenty hot enough for us. So anyway, on today's show, I go out and I visit some area hemp farmers. First, I stop in and I talk to the guys at ReLeaf Farmacy in Glenmore, and then I drive out to the Penn State Research Farm in Landisville, and then finally I find myself in West Hempfield. It's like a mid-season farmer check-in show. We check in with these farmers and hear how their crop is coming along. All right, but first, a quick message from our sponsor. This episode of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is brought to you in part by the National Hemp Association. The National Hemp Association is a nonprofit organization committed to the growth and development of all aspects of the hemp industry. Learn how the National Hemp Association can help your hemp operation. Become a member today at nationalhempassociation.org. National Hemp Association. Pushing progress. Okay, so like I said at the top of the show, I did sort of a mini hemp tour this week. Visited a few farms. And just a heads up, the sound quality isn't always great, but I know you were very patient and understanding when it comes to that, so thank you. All right, here we go. My first stop was to Bethany Farm. It's a raw milk dairy in Glenmore, Pennsylvania, in Chester County, where the guys from ReLeaf Farmacy are growing about 500 hemp plants this year.
My name is David Thompson, co-founder and operator of ReLeaf Farmacy. We are headquartered here in Glenmore, PA, in Chester County.
I'm Patrick Benzing from the Phoenixville area, certified horticulturist.
And the other guy involved in this is Dan Messner, who wasn't available for the interview, but it's his father's farm where they're doing their hemp operation. And these guys are doing what I imagine a lot of new hemp farmers are doing in Pennsylvania, where they've teamed up with an existing farm to sort of, take advantage of the land and the infrastructure and to create a situation that's beneficial for everybody, the hemp farmers and the existing farmers, in this case, a dairy farmer. And we know that dairy farmers can use a lot of help right now.
Dan's father getting older and wanting to hand over the farm to one of his kids because it's great to, I think there's about at least 4 or 5 generations of farmers in this family, and he'd love to hand off that legacy to his children.
So add that to the list of positive uses for industrial hemp, saving the legacy of the farm. So I was curious about the experience they had with the Department of Ag in getting the permit.
Basically a seamless process. Talking to Kathy and Sarah Pickle at the Department of Ag, they have a lot of genuine concerns about the program. But I'm so thankful to the Department of Ag that just opened up the opportunity for farmers to at least try it out. And that's where we kind of are doing. We kind of are doing a test batch. We sourced our seeds from Colorado, and our seed source is very excited to get their genetics on the East Coast to see how they perform. Right. So that even that, they haven't made any promises to us. We're not making any promises to them. It's like, hey man, let's just get a test batch here. And then long term, long term, we have opportunities to grow and expand. We have 5 acres here at our farm.
So how did you choose the varieties?
So yeah, it was crazy. We done a lot of research. Pat has a lot of research in strains. Obviously, my knowledge in the cannabis world as well. Really, you want to go out for. We're going. So another good thing to talk about is we're going for smokable flower almost exclusively. All that to say, you really want to get. That's just stuff that Pat should be talking about.
But yeah, we went with the most vigorous, freshest seeds we could find.
Plant structure is huge, so we're not dealing with plants falling over. And obviously, when you're talking about flower, you're talking about bud structure. You want a real dense of a bud as you can get. You want some real good, aroma, terpene profiles on the flower as well. So, some of our plants already has some really good aroma profiles, and the rest are just going to continue to get better as they flower.
Yeah, we'll work on some breeding. Breeding is definitely one of my passions, but for now, we're going to work on production, obviously, and we trust these genetics here.
So I see you've got plastic mulch down and some drip lines.
Mm-hmm.
What's your watering system like?
You know what? We've been just depending on the elements. The plants are super healthy, very vigorous. So we haven't been overwatering. That's always a big threat. You know, we want roots to reach down super deep. We're not dry farming, but it's something to think about. You know, we just want to, you know, root rot is a big deal, and a small root system is another big deal that can easily happen to these plants. They're annuals, so they need a strong root system. They're going to grow really big, and they need to, you know, they need to be sturdy. So yeah, we're being very careful with the watering setup. Okay. It's a sensitive issue. So
it's also good though. I think we literally probably turned the water on maybe once or twice. And to backtrack to our seed source in Colorado, they're growing like high altitude, dried, arid deserts. So they are trying to grow smaller bushy plants for the very reason that when those winds come through, smaller root structures get blown over, or you know just get dried out. So yeah,
a lot of
the same issues.
These genetics are drought tolerant, just like a lot of plants. But at the same time, we don't want to stress them out too much. We don't want to create a hot plant, and you know we don't want our cannabinoid limits to be over a very low number. So yeah, it's a fine line.
When do you expect the plants to go into flower mode?
Right around mid-August. Yeah, early August, we'll start seeing them go into their reproductive cycle. They have some pre-flowers now, so that's always a good indicator of, you know, I mean, they're feminized. But we had a couple males. Yeah, we're really excited about this mission. Plants are doing excellent, like we forecasted.
You did the rows on 5-foot centers?
Yes. Okay. Yep, 5-foot centers, a lot of open air circulation. With our wet falls, you know, it's definitely something to take into consideration. Like I was saying, these are genetics that have been bred in, well, a small part of their life in Colorado. Okay. So yeah, it was just high desert, and yeah, like I said, it's not the Mediterranean of Northern California climate, so we have a really wet fall to deal with, and a lot of our genetics are probably equatorial, so those are used to a lot of wet conditions. And then, you know, we have some other genetics that are probably more cold climate. So those, you know, with the short, tight habit and denser flowers, we're just trying to take that into consideration.
It seems like a pretty manageable sized plot here.
What's your
besides the mowing?
Right.
The mowing, yeah.
Yeah, we're kind of doing a
Very
gardening rather than a
yeah.
farming.
Yeah, right.
I think it's really important. We're trying to
it.
differentiate yourself. Yeah, Pat can speak to that as far as trying to keep a real purist spirit to this. So.
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of overthinking in this industry. There's a lot of hearsay, a lot of misinformation. But yeah, I mean, it's a very simple process.
Thinking about harvesting, a plot this size seems like a few people can get this done. What's the plan for harvest?
Well, we do have a barn, fortunately, so we have a lot of space, a lot of room to dry, you know, process our plants. But yeah, you know, we'll be creating our.
Making a plan. To be honest, a lot of still in the works. We're probably doing a lot. We're based on where the plants are testing at. We'd love to just if they're not going to test, why not let them grow longer? We can harvest when we need to. Every couple of days we can harvest what we need or when we need. You know, as long as it's all good. And then we also have plans, you know, to do some wet trimming. So some of it will go right to trimming and go right to. So we're not going to be, you know, having massive plants to cure, but some we do want to cure. So we're going to be testing. A lot of this is going to be testing a lot of different styles. You know, so we actually have a big tractor trailer over there. We plan on maybe putting out some racks to do some of that curing after we do some wet trimming. So we have a lot of, space here to kind of spread out. We plan on doing a lot of different kinds of curing methods and processing methods. So
it's your first year, so there's a lot to learn, and then by next year you'll sort of know you're
dialed in. Absolutely.
System.
Yep.
Yeah. How about advice for people who want to get in on growing hemp next year?
Get in, do a small batch next year. We kept on. The only reason these guys in Colorado wanted to work with us is because we were doing a really small scale thing. Mm-hmm. They actually had a guy up in the Hudson Valley up in New York that they were trying to partner 10 plus acres with him, and the guy had no idea what he's doing and became a headache for them. And they didn't want to deal with it. They have 300 acres. They're actually partnered. They're grading 1,200 acres and going to plan to do about 1 million pounds of biomass. So they are doing, that's between, I think, 6 to 9 farms. I can't remember how many, but anyways, he was excited. They're excited to get plants on the East Coast with us on a small level. So, yeah, it was a real small investment for us in the large scale picture of things. It was a very minimal investment for us. I mean, having a wife and 2 kids and isn't it definitely hurts the wallet a little bit, but it's worth the money. It's worth just trying out, testing out, is it going to work?
Good return on investment.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're here as a resource too. So anyone who's interested for next year, we want to be that resource. Like, let's just start you on something small, get you something that can be manageable for you. You can take care of yourself and get a couple friends to help you out.
So you said this is mostly for smokable flower?
Yeah, that's kind of where we're targeting our market opportunity, and we're really excited about that. CBD.
So what about the rest of the biomass? What are you going to do with that?
We're still trying to figure it out. I mean, honestly, Dan's dad would love to feed it to the cows. Obviously, he's got to get, that's the whole legal window. But I mean, the amount of protein and all the good stuff that's in hemp flowers. I have restaurants approaching us about getting biomass for their own edibles or for their own products and stuff. For topicals, yeah, it's just there's a whole opportunity that we're just tapping into. I also say another good plug is I'm actually a store manager at Advanced Hemp in Phoenixville for a man named Roman Fedorowski. He's growing an acre with Josh over at Susquehanna Hemp Company. So really good people. I'm saying all that to say we're establishing a really good network of seed to sale, because that's, to me, that's the biggest thing, the glaring hole. I'm not saying you haven't addressed in your podcast, but there is a human experience of someone walking into a store or paying an invoice that wants to know the quality of that product. Sure. And so we're excited to be basically on all fronts of that right now, of someone walking in our store, and I have the confidence that I'm putting a product in their hand, including Josh's product at Susquehanna Hemp, including the products we're going to develop and additional products we're going to be bringing into that shop in the coming weeks, that really taking care of people is really what it's all about. The customer experience is really what it's all about. So at the end of the day, these may be the best genetics for right now, whatever, but we are going to start getting demands for specific flower, and we're already realizing there's demand for strains. We've already been putting out the inquiries, and a lot of the shops are like, wow, you're already growing that? I'm already going to buy it. I'm like, oh, well, we're probably not going to have enough. And we're talking to wholesale distributors. Before we talked yesterday, I got off the line with an organic wholesale distributor. There's no flower anywhere in the CBD market. And the CBD flower market is going through the roof right now. And because it's a little niche, and it's a ton of work, as you can, on scale, it's a ton of work, right? So, but you have some land and you have some friends that are dedicated to it. We're planning on making a good living on this, so, and being all right. So we're excited about the opportunity. All
right, that was David Thompson and Pat Benzing of ReLeaf Farmacy in Glenmore, Pennsylvania. I'll have contact info for ReLeaf Farmacy on the webpage for this episode at lancasterfarming.com. The next stop on my mini hemp farm tour was to the Penn State Research Farm near Landisville, Lancaster County. Its official name is the Southeast Agricultural Research and Extension Center, where I caught up with Dr. Alyssa Collins. She's the director of the research farm and is overseeing the hemp project there. And just a heads up, there is a little bit of wind on this recording, so bear with me.
Hello.
Hi, thanks for coming out. So today we are actually out in the field among our plants. We've got a number of projects going on this year, but one of which is learning how to grow CBD type plants. It's a real different growing system than we're used to with fiber and grain production, and so we wanted to get a feel for it and find out what the pitfalls are, what the right choices are, as far as we can, to tell growers when they ask us questions. So we're in a field with these plants, and the field is actually also shared with regular vegetable crops. So we have tomatoes and peppers and eggplants right alongside, because that's the growing system we think is going to work well here. So we're growing on black plastic with trickle irrigation. We're fertigating, so we're adding our fertility right in the irrigation line. And we've got plants out here that were transplanted about 3 weeks ago. And they're ranging in size anywhere from 6 inches to about 2.5 feet. And we think some of the challenge out here has been transplant stress. So when we transplanted them, we're looking at 3 different varieties out here, but when we transplanted them, it was very wet. It was during a wet period, and we do have some clay content in this soil. So I think we got some glazing of the sidewalls when we made our holes, and then some of the plants just weren't really able to overcome that. So the root systems wanted to push out, but they kind of met some resistance where the root balls were meeting the soil in the ground. And so I think that's why we see such different rates of growth out here, because the plants that really got rooted in, they took off, and they're easily 3 or 4 times the size of the plants that are struggling. Yeah. So that's one thing we learned out of this so far.
Are they all the same variety?
We have 3 different varieties. We got generously donated from a few different growers. And so one is Young Sim 10, one is Cherry Wine, and one is Magic Bullet. And so what we'd like to do with this is, first of all, just get comfortable with the growing system. But in addition to that, we'd like to use some of these plants to figure out, well, at the end of the season or going through the season, we do have the need to understand what the plant's doing. So what's it need in terms of fertility? What CBD and THC levels is it running? And so we'd like to take parts of these plants and send them to different labs. So using the same plant, sending them to different labs and comparing the results we get back so that we can understand how comparable they're going to be depending on what lab you send them to. Our general recommendation right now is to just pick a lab and stick with it so you can monitor through the season. But different labs use different methods of testing, and that could have an impact on the results we get back. And that could theoretically be a big issue for growers, especially who are monitoring THC and CBD.
Are there things that you can tell about the plant just by looking at them, apart from size, about stress, or you said trying to figure out what the plants need? So what can you tell from these plants? What do they need?
So some of these plants, if we get close, we would want to look in the lower canopy, because the lower canopy usually is where we'll see some yellowing if they have any nitrogen stress at all. It's also where we might see other nutrient stresses show up.
Can we go have a look?
Sure. So we're looking right now at a plant that looks like it's getting a little bit stressed out. It's got some crunchy leaves down below that have died down, and it's got some yellowing or chlorotic leaves. Now, one of the things I can feel right here is it's really loose in its planted hole, and that tells me that the root system is really struggling. One of the things about this site that we run here is we have a lot of wind. And some of the winds last week, we noticed some of these plants were laying over. So we've come out and we've put cages on to support them, just like you would do with a tomato plant. But this plant may have gotten a little too much wind stress. And if you feel it right there, you'll feel how it's pivoting.
Oh, yeah.
So anytime we see symptoms above, we want to look below, because that can tell us an awful lot. And that's true with any crop, really. You want to make sure the root system is what you think it should be, that it's robust and it's nice and white and bringing up nutrients and water like it should. So this plant here is struggling, I think, because of that. There's a few other things we can see out here, and one of them is this plant's partner right here is starting to flower. And that is not something we want to see right now. So this plant appears to be a male plant because we can see pollen sacs developing right in the crux here of this stem. And those sacs indicate that it's a male plant and it will produce pollen. Now, the valuable material for CBD and medical marijuana production is female plants. And that's because if we can keep them from getting pollinated, they produce much higher quality essential oils. And that means that we can keep the plant growing for longer, and the plant will get bigger. And as long as it doesn't get pollinated, it will keep making more flowers. So we can theoretically get a much greater, higher quality yield if we prevent pollination.
So would you take this plant out soon, or what are you going to do with that?
So if I were a real live CBD grower, I would take this plant out. I would rogue it out, and if I had any additional females available, I would probably just replant with a female. This is valuable to us because we get to show people the differences and teach them how to reliably sex plants, which is what you need to do if you're growing this crop. We're finding that even in plants that were all supposed to be females, where the seeds were feminized with a chemical treatment or that were cloned off a female plant, that we still do get some males popping up. And that can happen due to stress. It can happen because, you just don't necessarily get what you think you're going to get. And so it's really important to be vigilant and pull those males out as soon as you can, because they're not really very valuable in terms of production of these oils.
But don't you think having this would mess up your production of CBD, but you're not interested in getting a product at all?
Right. Here at this location, we're a research farm, and so we do things a little bit different, which means we're literally growing CBD plants right next to industrial hemp that's for fiber and for seed. So we always knew that we were not getting a good CBD crop off of this. So the point of this is not to do that. It's mostly as a teaching tool.
Dr. Collins also told me about another research project that Penn State is conducting in conjunction with several, or I should say many, other research institutions across the U.S., including Colorado State, West Virginia University, University of Tennessee, NC State, Washington State, Michigan State, University of Kentucky, Virginia Tech, Oregon State, Colorado State, Mississippi State, Cornell, Louisiana State, and Kansas State. And so each of these schools is growing the same 11 dual-purpose varieties, a fiber grain variety. And the study is going to look at agronomics, crop quality, genetics, and economics. And then the goal is to have a great big data set that everybody can learn from. And also, Dr. Collins told me in a follow-up email that Penn State is also doing a separate study to investigate how best to go about harvesting of fiber crops. They're looking at 2 different varieties and harvesting at 3 different times and either retting or not retting before baling. And the Groff North America folks have offered to process the samples so everybody can benefit from the data they generate. So, all right, lots happening there at the Penn State Research Farm. Thank you, Dr. Collins. Oh, hey, so while we're on the topic of Penn State and the research farm, if you want to see their hemp research in person, you're in luck because they're hosting a hemp research field day on Tuesday, August 6th from 4:30 to 8:30. You can pre-register online for $10. I'll have a link to that on the show page, but walk-ins are welcome. I think it's like a $15 fee. There's going to be, speakers talking about CBD production and genetics and testing, and there'll be, networking and Q&A, all that stuff, plus a tour of the hemp fields. I was at the event last year, and I learned a lot and met a lot of great people. So check that out. All right, moving on. The last stop I made on my mini hemp tour was just about 4 miles south of the Penn State farm. I went out to West Hempfield Township, where I stopped in to see Tom Culton. You remember Tom, he's been on the show a few times now. He gave me a tour of the farm and the fields, and I saw a whole lot of hemp plants, maybe 10 acres or so. We sat down in the doorway of the old bank barn and shot the breeze a little bit. It's great to be out here on the farm on this very warm July day. Thought we could check in and see how your hemp crop is moving along.
Well, it's nice to have you here, Eric. It's beautiful growing weather. We're through our first cycle, and now we're into our second cycle of autoflowers here. The ones that I showed you earlier are just starting to flower now, and we did just plant about 2 weeks ago, direct seeded into the ground out there, so we have some that are just poking out, and we're hoping to finish them off about late September, early October.
So what's the total acreage or number of plants?
That field right there is 3 acres, and that field out there is 5.5, and then there's 2 there, so 5, 3, and 2. That's close to 11.
Okay. Can you talk about the varieties?
Sure. This variety here is out of Switzerland. It's just got a number I have to check it on my computer, but it just came with a number. It's well below the percentage. And then out there, we have a cherry auto. We also have a BAOX auto, and that's crossed with, I gotta look. But most of the autos that we're working with here are like, because they're from the cherry wine lineage, so it's just what's available right now. And then there's a few more in the pipeline that are getting away from that cough syrupy kind of stuff, because for more smokable flower, we're looking for more different terpene profile and more flavor profile. But that's still to come, you know. We're definitely in the middle of it for sure.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about like the plant spacing and maybe what you did for ground cover or mulch.
Sure. Well, I used plastic mulch on these here. They were this field here was direct seed. This was transplanted here. The field that you just saw out there, we transplanted directly into the plastic, or we direct seeded directly into the plastic, which I don't advise for novice growers unless they really know what they're doing, or they have a lot of like capital at their expenditure. So we used 4-foot spacing on these, and out there we used the 2.5-foot spacing, because those plants, since it's the light, it's not dependent upon the light cycle, but they're about a 70-day plant, so I don't expect their vegetative growth to be astronomical. So we condensed them a little more. So that's something new but exciting, because you know, get more bang for your buck.
Do you think that autoflower will be commercially available?
Absolutely. I'm not saying through our companies, but I know commercially through, definitely in Oregon, there's several companies that are going to be offering autoflower in bulk for sure. I see it for, I don't see it as the exclusive route to the future, but I do see it as kind of like an accessory to full-term varieties that are photoperiod dependent. You could actually use your canopy space that you're not using in between your rows. You could actually pot these up and run landscape fabric actually the whole way down your row and just throw these in pots. And
they're fine in pots?
Absolutely. Yeah. They almost prefer it. Huh. This is mainly because I'm against plastic. As much as I can be with using plastic mulch.
How about harvest time? You said you harvested some.
Yes, we harvested our first autos. It was the 750 plants that we had put into the ground in March, and we had to put the tunnels over those to start. And they were harvested, dried, cured, tested, and they went on to a private buyer who is shipping them out of the country, actually.
Okay. And where'd you do the drying?
Right here where we're sitting. That bay right over there, we just open up these doors, and then we just bring 2 fans in to just kind of shush the air a little more. Yeah. But this barn was perfectly designed for drying thick leafy plants. You see how the slats are spaced to get the airflow through. Yep. And then if we need a little more, we can kick the sides open.
So we just all hang them in big...
We'll hang across like this. Yep. We use the lath, so I'll take a lath like this. And one plant here, straddle. Got it. And since the plants are only about 3.5, 4 feet tall, you know, they hang perfectly, and we can really space them in there. I like to defoliate a little bit, like those big fan leaves. We'll chop them off just to kind of get the air going in there and just make sure there's no funky mold growing in there. And then I just check them every other day just to make sure because mold will come pretty fast. Yeah.
And your buyer, he was just buying the flower?
Just flower, yes.
What'd you do with the other biomass?
The biomass? That went to a friend of mine who's making a skateboard ramp out of it.
Nice. Cool. All right. Anything else you want to tell our listeners about your season here?
Just anybody out there that's, you know, encountering some issues, you know, just keep the faith, and, you know, hopefully your problems will turn around. And if you're out there having astronomical success, good on you too. And that's all from Tom Culton in West Hempfield Township.
All right, thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Eric.
We're going to hear more from Tom next week. And we're also going to talk to Dr. Alyssa Collins again next week. If you were listening carefully, which I'm sure you were, you may have picked up on a few sort of interconnected details. First, Tom's farm is less than 5 miles away from the Penn State farm. Second, Penn State is growing a bunch of grain and fiber varieties, while Tom is growing for CBD exclusively. So next week we're going to talk about accidental pollination. Tom has expressed his concerns about wind-borne pollen from the research farm having its way with his CBD crop. So I was hoping to have them both come on the show and talk to each other about this, but because of certain threatened legal actions, they're unable to do that. So I'm going to talk to them individually and get both perspectives and see what we can see. If things go well for my scheduling, I'm also going to bring in a cannabis lawyer from out west to sort of get a perspective on how they're doing things out there, how they've solved or not solved these same issues. Because this is a major issue. Like if you're growing for CBD, you need to know who's in your area growing for fiber, right? And there is no way at this point to really know who's growing what. There's no map given out by the state. There's not growing zones. So these are things that here in our first year of growing hemp commercially in Pennsylvania, we need to sort this stuff out. So tune in next week for that. No, but hey, if you have concerns about this or you've run into issues like this, call me up and either leave me a voicemail, 717-721-4462, or send me an email at podcast@lancasterfarming.com. I would love to hear from growers anywhere, just to hear about how you solve this or any issues you may have had. So very curious, please get in touch. Okay, so that's almost the end of the show, but first I've got more information for you about the 2019 Pennsylvania Hemp Summit that we're holding in Lancaster on October 7th and 8th. There's a landing page, teampa.com/PA Hemp Summit, where you can go and register for the event as an attendee or an exhibitor or even as a sponsor. So go check that out. I'll be telling you about this pretty much from now until then. And I think I mentioned this last week, but we're going to be recording a live episode of the podcast from the welcome reception. So please come be in the audience and ask questions. I'm really looking forward to that. So, okay, that does it. Thank you for listening to today's show. I am your host, Eric Hurlock. I'm the digital editor at Lancaster Farming, the greatest farming newspaper in the world. Yeah, and if you were a subscriber, you would know that I am not kidding about that. Check us out, lancasterfarming.com/podcast deal. Become a subscriber. And also, hey, there's going to be a story in this week's paper about hemp in Pennsylvania and whether or not it's actually removed from the list of controlled substances. So check that out. All right, thanks again. Until next time, see you in the newspaper. Hello again. I look forward to this part of the show. I really like this weird music. Anyway, today's show is copyright 2019, Lancaster Farming, part of the Steinman Communication family. Today's show was written and recorded and edited and produced and sweated over by yours truly, Eric Hurlock. The music you hear is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow. And so let me ask you this. Is it hot enough for you?
Industrial hemp.